Let's talk about preferences. Preferences are the options that you can activate, change, or deactivate depending on your needs. And it's gonna make your interaction in Blender easier. For a start, go to the Edit and Preferences. And you can see this is all the preferences that we can have. But for now, from the top, we have a splash screen, and a splash screen is the middle window that every time you open Blender, you're gonna see. If you don't like to see that window, you can deactivate the splash screen. Also, whenever I hover on any one of these options, you see an explanation tooltip under my mouse. If you don't like to see this explanation, you can deactivate the user tooltip. That's for here. You can also have translation. If you'd like to change the Blender language to something else, you can change the language to any other language that you want. But I suggest that you don't do it because all the tutorials are in English, and if you change it to something else, it's gonna make your learning curve a lot harder. So please put it in English. The next option is from the input. As I have said before, for orbiting in Blender, you use the middle click for orbiting in Blender, and control middle click for zoom in and zoom out, and shift and middle click for pan and tilt. But for people that come from other software like Maya, they mostly use left click for navigation, and if you used to navigate with left click, you can activate the emulate 3 button mouse, and when I activate emulate 3 button mouse, I can replace the middle click with alt and left click. Now I'm pressing the alt and left click, and you can see that I'm gonna orbit around my object. For zoom in and zoom out, I use Ctrl Alt left click, and for pan and tilt, I use Shift and Alt left click. So you can activate emulate 3 button mouse. The next option is from navigation. We have two type of orbit in Blender. The first type is turntable, and turntable is the default method of orbiting. We also have another type, and it's called trackball. And first look at here, if I move my mouse up and down, this is the kind of movement that we can have. But if I change it to trackball and do the same with my mouse, we can see that the type of movement is gonna change. So test it out, and if you like it, you can change it to trackball, but I used to go with the turntable. There is another option, orbit around selection, and orbit around selection is need to be on edit mode in this scene. So I select a couple of vertex, and if I orbit around my object, it doesn't matter here where I select. The movement is always gonna be the same. If whether I select here or here, it's gonna be moved the same. But if I activate the orbit around selection, and for example select this vertex, the position of the vertex in your screen is gonna stay the same. And if I orbit now, you can see that the vertex is not gonna change. For example, let me activate here, and the position of the vertex is not gonna change, but if I deactivate it, it's gonna change in a screen. So I suggest that you activate orbit around selection. There is also another option, zoom to mouse position, and by default it's deactivated. If it's deactivated, it doesn't matter where I put my mouse. For example, if I put my mouse here and zoom in, it's gonna zoom in the same way anywhere I put my mouse. But if I activate the zoom to mouse position, if I put my mouse here and zoom in, you can see that I zoom in to where my mouse is, and it's very useful in modeling. Okay, so orbit around selection, zoom to mouse. We also have key map. Key map for the first option is if you want to select your object with right click instead of left click. For example, I can click my object with left click, but if you want to select your object with right click, you can use the right click. Next option is a spacebar action. And look at here, if I press the space, you can see that it's gonna be played. But since we want to just do modeling, you don't really need to play any animation. So it's better to tools or search. The tools, if you press a space, you can see that it's gonna be show you a window that contains all the tools in your toolbar. And I don't like it because it's redundant, but if you want to see it like this, you can do it. But search is really useful because, for example, if you're on edit mode, you have all these features that you can do in edit mode. And by activating the search, for example, if I want to vertex rib vertices, if I press space and search for rib, you can see that I have access to that feature without going to, for example, vertex and rib vertex. For example, I select on this vertex and I want to rib vertices, I don't need to come here. I selected a space called RIP and I have access to rib vertices. And that's for now. So the next option is from the system. And in undo steps is the number of steps that you can push Ctrl Z to go to the previous action. And by default is I think 25, but I suggest that you push it all to the 256, because the more undo steps that you can have, you can back to the previous action more. And sometimes you really want to go back because you make a mistake, and if you can't go back to the, for example, 100 steps, you're gonna have to create your object from the start. So push it to the 256. And that's it for preferences. Congratulations to reach this point. I know some of these videos were boring, but I wanted to teach you fishing and not give you a fish. So these videos were the foundation of modeling in the future videos. And I promise from this point we're gonna only focus on modeling. So see you on the next video.